Hey everyone, and welcome again to COM 110 Media Writing. So, while we are meeting once per week, either on Monday or Friday, depending on which section you registered for, I will also have some materials for you, lecture materials, in the form of these videos for you to review before your class meeting. So, if you're meeting on Friday, you should have watched these videos, one, two, maybe three videos. This week it's just one, but you should watch any of the videos before Friday. If you're in the Monday class, you should be watching the videos before Monday. That way we can jump off from what the videos covered and spend our time in class efficiently and effectively. So this first week is an introduction week. You've been reading the syllabus and filling out your grade contract and getting oriented to the course. And chapter 1 of the textbook is your basic overview of the textbook and therefore the course. So in this mini lecture, gonna cover the digital native challenge, responsibilities of media writers, the role of skilled writing, and then preview week 1 activities. So what do I mean by digital natives? Maybe you've heard this term, maybe you haven't, but this just means you grew up with the internet and probably smartphones. So I'm a millennial. I did not grow up with the internet, as make me sound really old. The internet was a thing when I was probably 11 or 12 years old, around the time of 9/11, which that's not really relevant, but it's just a year. Um, but so I wasn't like a small child playing on an iPad learning games or whatever. The internet was definitely a thing when I was in middle school and high school. AIM was the thing with the away messages. There's a lot of nostalgia for early 2000s, but my point is most like younger millennials and then the post millennial slash Gen Z, however you identify, you're digital natives. You grew up with the internet, you grew up with devices. Whether or not you use them in early in your life doesn't really matter. You just grew up with them existing. And in our 21st century context, even 10, 15 years ago, this was true that audiences have become both consumers and producers of a diverse array of media. So before the internet was really a thing, so this is even before the 1980s, because the internet existed in the late 1980s, even if everyone didn't use it. Anyway, I'm sorry for the tangents, but way back when, like prior to the 1980s, people really were just relying on newspapers and magazines and television for their news or their entertainment. So there was no social media, there was no TikTok, there was no YouTube, there was no Netflix, all of that. And these are all things that we are consuming every single day, but we're also creating that medium. Even if it's just your personal Twitter account, and say you only have 10 followers, you're still creating content for those followers. And maybe you have hundreds of followers or maybe thousands. I don't know. I think there's an LR student who like went viral on TikTok and has a million followers or something like that. But the point is, anybody can create this content, anybody can be a media writer essentially. But this course is really aiming to help you become a professional media writer and differentiate between those standards of academic and professional writing versus your amateur, everyday content creation that you might be doing. And further, this converged environment has blurred the lines between news writing and persuasive writing. So, one thing that we will be talking about a lot this semester is the resource AllSides, allsides.com. And that's essentially a media literacy website. Their focus is on bias and political leaning, but that's not the only way to differentiate news writing from persuasive writing. So we just want to be very cautious about our writing that we are doing, and if we are writing a news report, keeping it informative and not persuasive. And most of you probably have taken Com 111. Some of you have taken it with me, and you will probably remember the discussion about informative speaking versus persuasive speaking. It's the same principle, but with writing. We also have issues with misinformation and disinformation. So we live in this era of media saturation, and anybody can create a website that looks credible but is totally fake and full of ads and misinformation and stealing people's identities. Like, there's so much that can go wrong in the world of media that we want to be aware of. Anybody can publish anything, and the current levels of distrust with mainstream media are very high. So, I want to acknowledge that, and wherever you fall on your opinion about the media, it's something that we need to talk about. It's kind of the elephant in the room, this distrust in the mainstream media, whether that's CNN or Fox News. Those are both considered mainstream, and audiences have issues with both of them. And so audiences are looking to niche or even radical outlets to get their quote-unquote news, and we want to be very careful about how we are evaluating actual news. So a lot of the lessons that you'll learn in this class are things that you will take away with you just as you consume media in your life. And we're also going to be teaching you how to effectively and ethically write for different media platforms. So just to elaborate on that previous slide, we are going to look at All Sides quite a bit just as a resource. They have this graphic. It's very simple. It's not like a fancy graphic, but I just swiped this from their Instagram. The difference between news analysis and opinion. So news is what happened. It's factual. It's reporting. Analysis is what happened and why. The writer considers the facts and draws conclusions. Now, this is still not in the realm of opinion. Analysis involves a great deal of research and interpretation. So the writer has a perspective, but they arrive at that perspective from a great deal of research and putting a lot of argumentation behind their analysis piece. Opinion really is that surface level. This is what I think about what happened. It is value-based. I think this is good. I think this is bad. This is evil. This is beautiful. Whatever. It's a judgment. Analysis doesn't really judge. It just provides an interpretation of the events. And then we'll be talking about fake news as well. Media professionals must now be able to create and deliver content that is accurate, relevant, and on point for fragmented, time-pressured audiences. So this is just the idea that, A, we need to think about ethics in terms of accuracy and relevance, so the credibility of your work, and also on point for fragmented audiences who are looking for news and information from a ton of different sources. A lot of people are getting their news from Twitter or from Facebook or even from TikTok. And that's what we mean by a fragmented audience. 30, 40 years ago, everybody was getting their news from ABC, NBC, and CBS and their local newspaper. And that was it. And also time-pressured audiences. We all have short attention spans, including your professors, so it's not just a youth thing. This course will also help build your media literacy. So I mentioned this. So you understand the difference between fact and opinion, truth and fiction. So this is a really, really important course. Our focus is not media literacy, but that is a byproduct of the course for sure, because you'll be learning how to write accurately and ethically, so you'll know what to look for when you are consuming media. So, professional media writing, as I said earlier, is not the same thing as amateur media writing. So, you may do quite a bit of informal writing for your friends on social media or your personal blog. And when I say writing, I also mean speaking to a certain degree. Like if you go live on Instagram and you're monologuing, or you do TikTok, I mean, hopefully you've thought about what you are going to say before you do that. So there's some element of writing to it. But also just the captions that you write, the stories that you post, and how you're framing things. That's all informal writing that you're doing. If applied properly, that can help build your abilities to choose the right words and to assemble coherent sentences, but professional media writing requires a highly developed skill set and the ability to produce pieces that are accurate, ethical, thorough, clear, and tailored to your audience's media preferences. So that's one of our core course outcomes. Your writing at the end of this course should be accurate, ethical, thorough, clear, and tailored to your audience. Next, we have some media responsibilities and challenges. There will be a whole chapter on ethics and legal issues, but generally speaking, there are three main responsibilities. Number one is informing audiences. So some forms of media writing, like news, and some forms of public relations, like press releases for an organization, that are just designed to be purely informative. But also other forms of media, so other PR writing, strategic communication, crisis communication, business communication, any op-ed or long-form journalism, sometimes those analysis pieces of journalism and opinion pieces as well. They're designed to be persuasive with the goal of influencing publics. Third, preserving a democratic system of government. So do you remember hearing in like your senior civics class or something that media is the fourth branch of America's democratic system? It's kind of cliche, and it's definitely under scrutiny in the last decade or two in terms of partisan media and liberal media and conservative media. But historically, journalism is not the same thing as all media, which we'll talk about, is tasked with being a watchdog of our government. And really, it's that system of checks and balances, but instead of executive, legislative, and judicial, we have the media as part of that watchdog. And so a lot of people that are critiquing media, whether they're critiquing it for being left-wing or right-wing, are forgetting that media, whether or not you agree with the take that they are presenting, are performing that duty in some regard. Now, we have to fact check, and we have to make sure that they're not manipulating audiences, but at the end of the day, it is their job to critique and to be critical of our leaders, and not just like blindly supporting whoever's president. So we're living in a very polarizing time, but believe it or not, this is not the most polarized it's ever been in terms of media bias or slant. In the late 19th century, newspapers were just like owned by political parties. And usually if you were a Republican, you weren't going to subscribe to the Democratic newspaper, but it was very split. Like, not everybody read the same sources. So we're seeing that, of course, today with who is tuning into Fox and who's tuning into MSNBC and CNN, but it was more institutionally separated in the past, where people really did not have any access to other perspectives. And we have access to them now. It's just a matter of, are we looking at all of the perspectives or not? So, the role of skilled writing. This is a writing course. And whatever you end up doing for your job after college, and you might be working in the field of communication, or you might be here because you're minoring in communication and will be working just in a business role or whatever, writing is always something that your employers are going to expect. And in the industry, in the communication industry, in a television newsroom, which that's kind of, I mean, those jobs are very few these days, or preparing advertising copy for a client proposal, writing is a frontline skill that your bosses, clients, and audiences expect. This is not something that will be a waste of your time. It may not be the most interesting class, and I get it. It's not the most interesting class to teach. I love the ethics aspect of it and thinking about the role of media from a larger philosophical perspective, but the actual teaching of writing skills is not that interesting. So I totally get it. We're doing this together, but it's not going to be a waste of your time. And you are going to stand out so much when you can demonstrate your strong writing skills. And the same thing with speaking skills too, which is why we require COM 111. Couple more notes here, and then we will wrap up. So I mentioned the digital natives aspect earlier. Many critics argue that millennials and Gen Z use social media in such a personal and unprofessional way that their writing skills have suffered as a result of their attention to these fast-paced new media. I'm not necessarily going to argue with that, but I mean, this is also like a critique of my generation, so I'm like a little defensive about it. But I mean, it's not that it's untrue, but it's also not totally fair because there are a lot of reasons why that short, fast-paced, like shorthand writing can be effective to certain audiences, especially. So we have to toe this line of professionalism. If you're writing for a news outlet, your standards of professionalism are going to be pretty high. If you're writing for social media, yes, you have professional writing standards, but you'll also be expected to speak the language of your audience, which in our case now is speaking the language of Gen Z. So the phrases and the mannerisms that Gen Z exhibits, it's good for you to be able to speak to that generation to appeal to them. So it's a balance. We want to always lean on the professional side, but know that that construct, it can be highly problematic for a lot of different reasons related to like race and gender and the standards of American English and grammar and all of that. That's not necessarily part of this course, but something we'll be thinking about in terms of just the standards of your writing. So this is leading into the preview of this week's activities. To begin this course, you really want to figure out where your starting point is with writing. And you want to think about these 5 things. Writing apprehension, so any anxiety you have about writing. And that's not just like anxiety getting started. That's part of it, but you can have anxiety about a lot of different parts of the process, like drafting, getting feedback, revision. Writing self-efficacy, so your belief that you can do it. Writing approaches, your own personal strategies, and then your straightforward skills in like grammar, spelling, and AP style. So this week you'll be doing some diagnostic questionnaires and quizzes to see where your starting point is. So then that leaves me with the preview. Again, you will be doing the Media Writer Self-Perception Scale, and that's going to take you a little bit, maybe 15-20 minutes. And then you'll do a couple grammar and style quizzes, and your grade is not dependent on your results on that. It's just a diagnostic to see where your starting point is. And then in class this week, we will review the highlights of the syllabus and the grading contract stuff. And we will do some writing exercises and just try to have fun with it. So my goal is to make this course as painless as possible because, again, teaching writing, taking a writing class, learning about writing conventions is not the most interesting thing, but writing in the context of media and social media and business and public relations is a little more interesting than just learning grammar or just learning AP style. So I will see you all either on Friday or Monday.